breaking news. Vancouver police issuing a warning to the public this afternoon that serial rapist Larry Takahashi, we've spoken about him on this show before,
at length,
also known as the Balaclava rapist, is going to be living at a halfway house in Vancouver. The VPD saying that he does pose a significant risk to the safety of teenage girls and adult women in the city of Vancouver. He is a moderate to high risk of reoffending. And this guy, if you're not familiar with him, this guy goes back, he's 63 right now. This is a case that goes back to the early 80s in Edmonton. Yeah. He has a black belt in karate. He was married, had kids, a family guy. He worked at University of Alberta.
And led a secret life, essentially.
And at nighttime, he would leave the house wearing a balaclava, and he would stalk women, total strangers, and brutally attack and rape them. He was convicted of something like he was charged with 70 counts of violent sexual offenses against 23 different victims, but police at the time felt that he may have attacked over 200 women.
So and this goes way back to the 80s, in 1984 he was sentenced to 3 life sentences after pleading guilty to 14 sexual offenses. Like you said, they believe he was likely involved in many more than that. Look, this guy's been in trouble before when he's been let out, where they've taken him back in, and now, and you know what, this seems to happen all the time in this city, that there is sex offenders or violent sex offenders being released back into the community. The police will issue a warning, and then within a couple of weeks, these douchebags have been taken back into custody.
Well, here's the horrifying part, is that Larry Takahashi has told the parole board that he still fantasizes about raping women. But they felt that since he had actually verbalized that to him, they thought that was a sign that was healthy, that he was, admitting these feelings that he had, and they thought that was a sign that maybe he was ready to be let out. Although, as you mentioned, he has been out on parole in 2013. He ended up going back in the clink. He was supposed to spend 60 days in a halfway house, but he got sent back early after just a few weeks, and he was also out in August of 2005 on day parole and started meeting up with a convicted sex offender in Vancouver and was sent back.
Now, you and I believe it was in the first week of the show that we started here, we're talking about Takahashi and the fact that he was going to be living in a halfway house. And at that stage, we just knew it was Metro Vancouver. We didn't know which city it was going to be.
We didn't even know if he was out.
Yeah, and so now we find out that this is going to be in Vancouver. And look, you know what? Absolutely. You just mentioned that the whole key to this whole thing is this guy has told the parole board that he still fantasizes about violent sexual fantasies. Yet they let this son of a bitch out. So here's the problem here. How do we keep the parole board accountable? Because we've found, and we're still building this list, we have found 3 instances since June of this year of high-risk sex offenders breaking their parole. June 3rd, high-risk sex offender James Benson escapes from his halfway house in Vancouver, later arrested in Coquitlam. July 10th, high-risk sex offender Richard Thomas Gould failed to return to his halfway house in Vancouver. He turns himself into the Surrey RCMP. August 2nd, high-risk sex offender James Brookshaw fails to return to his halfway house in Vancouver and was later arrested by the VPD. Now, if you
arguably, these guys aren't anywhere near as bad as Takahashi was.
So take into account the fact that this guy was meant to serve 3 life sentences for 14 different crimes, likely involved in many more, broken parole before, been rearrested many times before, and now they're going to let this guy into the city of Vancouver.
With the Vancouver police saying he poses a significant risk, and even the parole board admitting he poses a moderate to high risk of sexual and violent reoffending. So as a woman who lives in Vancouver, who lives downtown, and there are halfway houses downtown, I'm not happy about that.
No, I would imagine that you would be a little bit upset. I would imagine there's a lot of Vancouverites who are going to be increasingly annoyed by this, because what I don't understand is if the parole board knows that this guy, and is warning that he is at, medium to high risk to reoffend. The VPD is saying he's at high risk to reoffend. He's telling the parole board that he fantasizes about violently sexually assaulting women, yet we let this guy out? I'm sorry, but at what stage do we go, hold the phone, Chester, we need to start holding the parole board accountable? Who actually makes up the parole board? Who are they accountable to?
You know what, there there is a designation as a dangerous offender, I don't see why he wouldn't be declared one for the number of the victims, the number of people's lives he ruined. As mentioned, the 2 times he's already broken parole. What happens if this guy breaks parole again?
I'm going to say, he likely will. They're saying this guy is at high risk to reoffend.
Now,
He
remember,
still dreams and fantasizes about sexually assaulting women.
the last time we talked about this, you actually encouraged our listeners to write a letter to the parole board and tell them they weren't happy about it.
Absolutely.
And one of our listeners followed you up on that and actually made several phone calls until she got a call back from the people in the correction service. And this is what they told her. They said the rules are very strict. Takahashi has to sign out when he's going out. He has to say where he's going. He has to call once he's there. He has to wear a monitoring ankle device so that when he calls, the halfway staff know where he is and that he is where he says he is, and that any woman who wants to get to know him has to be informed by him of his past background, and he has to inform the people who are monitoring him that he is consorting with a woman.
604-280-9898 star 9898 on cell. Jamie has the same query as me. Jamie's in Vancouver. Jamie, welcome to the show.
How you guys doing?
Good.
I've been banging on this drum for years. The parole board is a wholly unaccountable independent agency whose release decisions, when they're in error, come with no consequence to the deciders.
Do you know who makes up the parole board? I've been asking people around the building all afternoon. No one seems to know.
Not only are you not going to figure out how that works, but like I wrote a letter to Vic Taves and he wrote me back because what I said to him when he was public safety minister is you should have the power to trump any release decision made by the parole board, especially when they're saying that he's likely to reoffend, he's still dangerous. There has to be someone that is accountable to us that can say, no, that guy there, he's not getting out, or he's not getting out without a tracking chip in his bloodstream or whatever. There needs to be someone that we elect that has a hammer on this file.
I know that people say we have to give people a chance to rehabilitate and get back out in society.
I get
but
that.
when you've got this kind of a background
Oh,
and a tendency to break parole, and you've done so much damage, and you are considered to be a moderate to high risk to reoffend, a significant risk according to the BPD, I don't want you on the streets of Vancouver.
And you know what? I don't want a violent sex offender on my street who's got a black belt in karate, because you know what? That's likely his MO. He probably beats the crap out of these women and then violently sexually assaults them. And guess what? We don't need people like that on our streets.
One of his victims was in her early 20s, and she was pregnant with twins, and she lost the twins after being raped by him.
Jamie, let me ask you this. As an everyday Canadian citizen like Linda and myself, how do we make the parole board listen to us? Because I just quoted 3 different instances of people who have broken their parole since they got out who were violent sexual offenders.
You know what I'm afraid it's going to come down to? Someone who is released on a bad decision is going to reoffend against the wrong person.
Yes.
Who brings charges against the Crown for criminal negligence for releasing someone whom they should have known better to hold.
I think the Crown is already negligent here. The fact that we know that this guy is high risk to reoffend. He told his psychologist that he dreams and fantasizes about violently sexually assaulting women. He told the parole board this. The parole board recognized that, but still decided to let him out.
Right. So Suzanne Anton in D.C. should throw a hammer down and say, no, we're holding this guy. The federal decision is null and void. If the federal minister won't do it, then the provincial minister has to do it. Someone's got to step up.
Jamie, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.